This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Do you ever find yourself playing the budgeting game? Well, with the Name Your Price tool from Progressive, you can find options that fit your budget and potentially lower your bills. Try it at Progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law. Not available in all states.
Still waiting in line? Again? That's time you'll never get back. Save time and money with Stamps.com. Over 4 million businesses have skipped the line with Stamps.com. Join them to save up to 90% off carrier rates from your computer or phone right now. Print postage for certified mail, registered mail, and packages in seconds. Then schedule a pickup right from your home or office. For a limited time, go to Stamps.com and use code PODCAST for a free welcome gift. Taxes and fees apply.
A Swift Kick in the Ass, episode 72.
All big changes start with a swift kick in the ass. Join the journey of lifelong friends, John Curren and Tom Stewart, as they make conventional thought bend over and take a boot to the keister. Warning, listeners may notice a force equal to or greater than needed to get your ass moving. A swift kick in the ass, living life on your terms.
Welcome, I'm Tom Stewart, and I'm joined with my lifelong childhood friend, John Curren. And today, Ctrl+Alt+Delete, rebooting your life. That's what the show is about, man. Welcome to the show, John.
Yeah, thanks, Tom. You know, isn't rebooting your life just a part of life? It's something that we do, and we probably don't even think that much about it. We don't think about hitting that Ctrl+Alt+Delete button. But I know I have hit that reset button many times throughout my life, and I think it's made me a better person overall. Long ago when I was attending the University of Florida, and I know I've talked about this on the show previously, there was a point in my life, especially the first year of college, I was away from home for the first time, and I went a bit crazy. I didn't really know that you had to attend classes in order to pass them. And I had like a 1.09 grade point average. I was about ready to be kicked out of school, and I was home for the summer when my report card came in, and my parents saw that. They called me home. I was over at a friend's house, enjoying the summer, and they sat me down and they said, "Johnny, we love you very much, but we're hitting your reset button. We're not going to pay for school anymore." And they didn't really say hit your reset button. Computers weren't really around back
Well,
then.
there's many things you could reset, but that's pretty funny.
Yeah, but the more I think about that decision, and they gave me a choice at that time. They said, if you want to continue with school, certainly go ahead and do that, but it's on your own dime. We'll help you save up enough money to get going. But after that, you're on your own. And that was a decision in my life. I call it a kind of a light switch moment. But it was absolutely a time where I reset my life.
It was a swift kick in the ass is what it was, John.
It was a swift kick in the ass. And man, I'm trying not to cuss. That sucker hurt.
Now, I think it's a perfect analogy for having a computer Ctrl+Alt+Delete as rebooting. I know in my work, as a broadcast engineer, almost all of our systems are IT delivered or IP delivered. And that's one of the first things we do when we troubleshoot. We go and we make sure to sometimes, if the computer's acting in a weird way, we ask the customer, have you rebooted, or will reboot? We'll take the initiative just to put the computer back in a normal state. And that's kind of what you need to do sometimes in your life. In that instance, like your parents were, rebooting you to putting you back into a state where you can start fresh with a new perspective. And I think that happens with us sometimes. We've had shows on recreating yourself. We've had shows about taking time and taking vacation. And this is similar to them. And it's all kind of wrapped in one, because I think you do have to find out, you have to let go of certain old habits in order to start new habits and start a new life. If you want to reboot or recreate, or reimagine, if you're a fan of Disney.
There's all sorts of ways or all different terms you can use. I was thinking about how you can regenerate yourself, like we're shape shifters and
Like Wolverine, man, they got a healing factor.
Yeah, but I think people, computers are so prevalent in our world today that we just can't really live without them anymore. Many of us can. I try to avoid them, but computers are a part of our life, and a lot of people can, they're familiar with the computer to say, oh, yeah, I know that. I've had my computer locked up, and I hit Ctrl+Alt+Delete, and I rebooted it, and it was fine. In the same way, we have bugs. Each and every one of us, we're like software. We have bugs. We need things that are problems that we need to fix in our life. I think also everyone can really relate to that. So it's this, if you're recreating yourself or you're rebooting, this is an opportunity to become a better person, to fix those bugs in your own life.
It's funny you bring that up, John. I was thinking the same thing, because when you hit Ctrl+Alt+Delete, the option right away is not to reboot. I mean, it's one of the choices, but there's also to end a process. And there might be a process that's eating up a lot of memory because it's corrupt. And sometimes you can just close out that one process. That process could be, analogous, be an analogy to something like a bad habit, maybe smoking or something that you're doing that you don't want to do, or something that's holding you back, or negative thinking. So same thing, you might not need a total reboot, but you do need to end those processes in order to move forward.
And in order to do that, not to get too geeky, but you need to open up your task manager, right? You need to look at what's going on in the machine. And if you're familiar with computers at all, you know what a task manager is. You've opened it up, you've seen the programs that are running, the ones that are locked up, and then you can make decisions on what to do. Do you want to try to close that? Do you want to, totally shut down everything and restart? That's really up to you. But going back to this Ctrl+Alt+Delete, think about what these things mean, what the terms mean. Control, it means the power to influence or direct. So when we go through a process of resetting ourselves, I think it's important to recognize what we control in our lives and what we don't. There's been a lot of times in my life where I thought I had a problem. I just share a quick story. When I was first working at the company that I work with, I started getting really down about my career because it seemed like every job I applied for, the good old boy syndrome hit. They were hiring somebody that they knew, or somebody that I thought didn't hold a candle, to my qualifications. I thought a lot of myself, and it really started to get me down because I felt like the company was holding me back because they wouldn't let me go up the next rung in the ladder. But
it was the man holding you back, man.
Yeah, I really started to think that way. But then I started to realize that I could just give in and just stay where I was, and be complacent or just settle, or I could take control. And when I took control, I started to realize that the company really didn't want me to just be there unhappy and keep me in a job. If you're good at what you do, then your boss might want to keep you around, and people can hold you down if you let them. But an organization, it doesn't have a soul. It's not breathing. It's not a person. I guess we could talk about Citizens United and the Supreme Court ruling that says, well, corporations are treated like people. But for this sense, it's not. Corporations, they don't really have a mind. And they don't really have power over you unless you give that to them. And if you've given your power to somebody, take it back, man. I mean, take it back. They probably don't want it to begin with. Start making decisions and start controlling your life. Um, the
I don't know if
second
you ever
part-
seen The Corporation, the movie. It's a documentary.
Oh,
And how you were just talking about how they bring in a psychologist to analyze if the corporation was an entity, like a human being,
right.
what would be their social profile. And at the end, it turned out they were psychopathic. They were a psychopath.
Yeah, I guess the point really I'm trying to make is that oftentimes we have a lot more control than we give ourselves credit for. We think that someone else or something else has control over us, but the truth of the matter is we have control over ourselves. So Alt is the next thing in Ctrl+Alt+Delete. And
That's
what
when you
Alt
wear
means-
high heels, right?
Alt?
The alternative lifestyle?
No, this has nothing to do
Oh,
with
okay.
alternative
Sorry.
lifestyle. I mean, what you do, man, is your that's your prerogative. But alt is I mean, it is for alternative, but it's making partial or minor changes to something, typically so you can improve it or to make it less extreme. And so if you think about alternatives, think about the options that you have, and the more options you can think of, a lot of the time we say, oh, we have no other choice. But the truth of the matter is that there are a lot of choices out there that we don't really consider because we just think they're terrible. We don't like them. But the fact remains is that they are, in fact, a choice and an opportunity. When you start looking at your choices and your opportunities, not whether or not you want to go for that or decide on that, but that it's a possibility, I think you really open up your world a lot to what you can do and what you can control. And then the last part is delete. And that's to strike out or remove something, to cancel, to erase. And we've talked about this on our show before. It could mean to delete, could mean to get toxic people out of your life.
Yes,
it could mean
absolutely.
Change your situation, change your environment. If you're going to do a total reset, like I did, moving to Richmond, I mean, I was sick and tired of Atlanta. I'd been there for 15 years, too long, and I needed to move on. I needed to reset, and I had a great opportunity to move to Richmond, Virginia. Never in my life would I think that I would have lived in Richmond, Virginia. No appeal to me whatsoever, but it was one of the best moves I ever made. And I've been here for 10 years now. Love it. And it was rebooting that gave me that opportunity that I probably would not have gotten.
And moving, John, is a very good time to reboot. When you change locations, sometimes when you lose your job, when you maybe break up in a relationship, when someone passes, when someone dies. I know every time that I've gone to a funeral, it really makes me reflect more on my life and how limited amount of time we really have on this earth and how we have to embrace the time that we do have.
Yeah, and those are triggers for a reset. In fact, when I was over 200 grand in debt prior to moving to Richmond. I knew I was up to my eyeballs in debt, and that does not include the house. That was credit cards, student loans. I guess I had a line of credit. It was a mess. I needed to do something drastic in order to reset my life and get on a good path. And that was the best thing for me to do. I agree. Changing that led to me wanting to just totally change my life, which opened me up to the possibility of moving. But when you don't want to just change locations, change environment, that's not often the answer to your problems. Think about it this way. Are you by changing your environment, are you confronting your problem or are you running from it? And I am a firm believer that you can't run from your problems. Once you start running, you're going to always run. You have to stand and fight sometimes. And I had been standing and fighting that financial battle for a long time, and I really needed to reboot. I don't consider it running from my problem. It was a reset so I could get on firmer ground and really take on the challenges.
In the 12-step world, they talk about hitting bottom. And this is similar. This is also sometimes when things are piling up on you and, whether it's an addiction, a drug addiction or alcohol abuse or gambling or sex abuse, sex addiction, maybe overeating. When you hit that point where you just hit rock bottom is usually the time when people decide to make the change and actually seek out help and realize that they can't go it alone, that they need a sponsor or they need, in the case of like we talk about in our show, an accountability partner, which is similar to a sponsor if you want to reach a goal. But these people, a lot of times they're actually fighting for their life. If they don't change their ways, if they don't stop drinking, if they don't stop doing drugs or gambling, their life is over. They're either going to die, end up in prison, or out on the streets.
Yeah, well, in keeping with the computer analogy, you have the blue screen of death, right?
Yeah.
And that really means that you have to look at the components of the machine and replace some bad parts to get it up and running again. Maybe you burned out your hard drive. If we're just talking about computers, but with people, I think there again you have to do an inventory of your life. Look at your environment, look at your friends, look at your family, look at the love in your life, look at your physical health, your mental health. All these various aspects that make you who you are. And then, once you have a good understanding of where you are and where you stand, then you can start making some changes. And, we talked about recreating yourself. Just no one really starts with a clean slate. You can try to wipe the slate clean, but our experiences do shape our lives, and we are who we are. You can't really change who you are, but you can wipe the slate clean of certain aspects in your life, and you can also change your behavior, your attitudes, and your opinions. And by changing your behaviors, attitudes, and opinions, you can for all intents and purposes, change them so much that other people and yourself will view you differently. That's why I think when we talk about recreating yourself or rebooting, it's you never really stop being you. You don't get an entirely new life, but you do get a fresh start
and a fresh perspective.
And a fresh perspective.
You wake up. You know that one of my all-time favorite shows is Breaking Bad. And do you remember when Mr. White was talking to Jesse, and Jesse was like, "Why are you doing this?" And he was like, "Because I'm awake." And he's finally saw something in his life. Unfortunately, it was down a bad path that he was heading. But that's not really that's what happens is when you reboot, is you wake up to be aware of what's around and what's happening in your life and realize what you can and cannot change.
Yeah, when you think about the influence, and I love that, when you wake up, there's no turning back from that point. Once I realized what I had to do to get my finances in order and started getting traction and started paying off all this debt, there's no way in hell I'm ever going back there again. I'm wide awake, and I will never allow that to happen. Reading The Laws of Power changed my life. It changed my perspective and view of the world so much. Once your eyes are open to how people can play you, and how the laws of power work, that changes you permanently. There's no going back to how you were. Think about.
But it can happen, John. Like, think about it, because people do stumble. So you could reboot, come up, and you're doing well. And what happens, I think, and what puts people in a vicious cycle is if they stumble, then they start to feel, regret for, oh man, why did I do that? They feel guilty for maybe missing the goal that they were trying to attain, or the bad habit that they're trying to get rid of. And then it leads to shame. And once they start feeling that shame, they fall back into their habits, their addiction, or whatever it might be. And that cycle increases. So they have to be aware when that does happen.
No, yeah, I absolutely agree with you. I think I would call that a soft reboot. To whereas they didn't really go through the intense process that they need to go through, and in order to do, they didn't do a hard reboot where it's like re-erase everything, start from scratch.
Well, in the computer world, a hard reboot is when the freaking thing is not responding to when you select reboot and you just unplug it and plug it back in. That's a hard reboot. And a lot of times that will straighten it up, but it's not that great for it. It shakes up the computer, and it's going to do the same thing in your life.
With that being said, sometimes it screws it up even more.
Yeah. Oh yeah, man. You can plug it back in, and all of a sudden your power supply is not working and the computer's dead. It's time for life support.
Yeah. Don't ever do a hard reboot when you're updating.
Yeah, Windows warns you of that.
Not good. Anyhow, again, Ctrl+Alt+Delete. And when you start asking yourselves these questions about, in the context of Ctrl+Alt and Delete, I think you're going to really see a world of difference. You're going to add some structure to your problems, and when you do that, you're going to be better able to really address the root issues of the problems. I hear a lot of people saying they feel like they need to change, but they're overwhelmed and they don't really know what to change or where to begin. And it's not even like anything is necessarily wrong. It's just that they have this feeling that they have to do something. To people like that, I think the Ctrl+Alt+Delete process offers you some opportunities to perhaps figure out what needs to change.
Well, unfortunately, John, in real life, when we're not as fortunate. So when we hit Ctrl+Delete, we see a list of problems or processes that are running, and we can see a percentage of how much memory they're taking up in the computer. But we don't have that. But you might equate it to reflection, right? Or meditating on something, or talking to someone.
That's what I mean when I'm saying apply the Ctrl+Alt+Delete principles to your life. Break it down and look at the control factor and start asking your questions, saying, what do I control? What don't I control? And a lot of times in regards to control, people spend a lot of time and energy and emotion on things they have no control over that they're trying to change when it's really beyond their control. I use getting a new job as an example. That I feel getting a new job really is a numbers game. It's about creating an opportunity to make a decision. And so if you're looking for a new job, what do? You write your resume, right? And then you take that resume and you hand it in with your application for a job that you're interested in. Well, you might get chosen for an interview. You might not. That's not within your control. You are in control of writing your resume. You are in control of filling out an application and submitting it. But your control stops there. So why would you just apply for one job at a time and wait until you hear back to see if you get an interview? It's a numbers game. Fill out the write your resume, fill out the applications, fill out as many as you possibly can. Treat it like a full-time job if you're that serious about getting a new job. And then when you get a phone call for an interview, then you have some more opportunities to make decisions. You can decline taking that interview. You can go in there and learn more about the job, which you might learn that that's not really the job for you. So it's, again, making a decision. But you can't make a decision to take a job if they don't make the offer. So, why bother wasting your time worrying about if they're going to make you an offer or not? Keep playing the game. Keep controlling keep doing what you can control and what you can do, and try to cast what you can't control off to the side. Because ultimately, if you keep pushing, keep making decisions where you can, you're going to ultimately get what you want. In the corporate world, I was very fortunate to have a manager that told me, John, do not plan on staying in one position more than 2 to 3 years. Because go in, learn the job, do a good job, and then go and jump to another department, do something different, learn something different. The more that you do that, the more you'll know about the organization and the more valuable you will be to that organization. And I'll tell you, man, that approach has served me very well. It's kept me challenged. It's kept me interested. And it's been, it's been a lot of fun. Again, I think it goes along with the Ctrl+Alt+Delete. It's resetting. Too many people are in a crappy situation and they just stay with it. What I'm saying is it's up to you to hit the reset button and change things, because otherwise you're just going to be unhappy. And if you're in a crappy situation, you're going to feel crappy. If you don't, there's something wrong. You're probably medicated. In fact, and I've been to that point to where I was feeling so bad about my situation that I considered going to the doctor. And for me, that was the reset moment for me to say, you know what? I'm in a crappy situation. I feel crappy. It's up to me to take control. And then you work it. The alternatives are these little things that you can do that may or may not make a difference. But if you don't try it, you'll never, ever know. So,
John, that brings up a point that when you do reboot, right, and you decide on what it is that you want to restart, and say we're setting a new goal and we want to change something about ourselves, you want to be very specific and not vague, because what happens, I think, sometimes is I want to change, but as you said before, they don't know what they want to change. You really have to spend time in that time when you're letting go of everything to figure out what it is that you want, because it's going to be difficult. It's not going to be easy. Any kind of change is difficult, and it takes that laser pinpoint focus in order to make the change. So you have to be very specific on what it is that you want.
Yeah, that kind of the delete part of this goes, I think the Ctrl+Alt+Delete all work together. You can do it simultaneously. You can all work these things together in parallel or separately. But you make a good point about the laser focus and how having a vague kind of definition of what you want to accomplish may actually create a situation to where you've already accomplished what you set out to do, but it's so vague that you don't even realize it. Back when I was in college, my friend of mine gave me a poster, and it said, "Justification for Higher Education." And it was this picture of this like Spanish villa, a mansion on the hill overlooking the ocean. And in front was this like 5-car garage filled with all of these exotic cars, and it was like, to me, that was like what I wanted. I wanted to have all these sports cars. And
You wanted to be Jay Leno?
Hey, I don't see anything wrong with that. Yeah, I would love, I'd love to have his car collection. I would love to be in that position to where I could have that hobby. I mean, it's an expensive hobby, but I had this picture in my head, and that's all fine and good. But the more I thought about that picture and my own life, I started to realize that, what, I had a pretty nice house. I had a wife who loved me. I had children who loved me. I had, a 4-wheel drive truck that I used to play around with. I had a couple of boats to play with. I had a car. I had the justification for higher education. I was doing well. And I was down on myself because I felt like I didn't have the mansion overlooking the ocean and the expensive sports cars. But I really had so much to be thankful for that it started to, I kind of overlooked that because, I overlooked what I had. And I had actually kind of reached my goal sometime before and not even really realized what I had. So, don't take.
So you bring up a good point. That's gratitude. And that is something that's very important that you can't forget. And in any religion, you see that in religion where, you say thank you to your gods or your God or whatever it might be. I know I say thank you every day for, having healthy kids and that, they're safe and things haven't happened and we don't live in a war-torn country, that we have fresh water to drink and, good food to eat and we have a roof over our head. And I think that is important. That embracing that kind of attitude, I think, makes you more genuine and helps you reach your goals better, because by being a genuine person, you get support from others, and that's what you need. You can't do it on alone. You're not an island, and you can't do it without the support of others.
Yeah, and that's where I think the delete part comes in. Is when we talked about it before, it was moving away, deleting toxic people from your life, but it could actually be deleting some of these behaviors, attitudes, and opinions in your life that no longer really serve their purpose. I remember back at that time, Tom, and it's interesting that you're talking about blessings and the religious part of it. And I remember thinking, don't they say don't count your blessings? Because I was really thinking about all the different ways that I had been blessed. And you just did kind of the same thing, mentioned all the things that you're thankful for. And I guess I don't really understand why you shouldn't count your blessings.
I know you shouldn't count your eggs before they hatch.
Absolutely.
But no, I don't think there's anything wrong with realizing that. I mean, we were talking as some friends of mine last weekend. We were having a discussion, and they were going through all these things, like things that had happened to them, or friends that they know that are really going through things with chemo and disease and losing jobs. And it puts it in perspective and say, wow, that's my dad used to say it to me, when I was a kid and I wanted something. He would always quote something, and I don't know who said it, but he would always say, I used to cry because I had no shoes until I saw a man that had no feet. And I think it is realizing what we have. And, I know people have stuff, and people that might be listening to this might be going through chemo or, have things that they're facing, that are really heavy stuff. But there has to be something that you can latch onto, whether it's someone to go through it with you. If you have a spouse or a family member or a friend, those things you got to latch onto and focus on that positive side and not focus on the negative, because we're all gonna face death. We're all gonna face crap in our life. There's no way about it. Sometimes we have less crap. Sometimes we have no crap. Sometimes we have a lot of crap. It's just a matter of, trying to pull through it and doing the best and accepting it for what it is. We can't get down on ourselves. It is life. and none of us are immune to it.
And it goes, that goes back to the control about you do what you can to control, but you have to realize too that we can't control everything, and you have a choice. You can dwell on it, or you can just accept it for what it is, and try to move on the best that you can. I've noticed too that when people, especially not necessarily with health issues, because if you just got diagnosed with a terminal illness, that's pretty hard pill to swallow. And
yes.
That would be extremely difficult. And going through chemo and having a health scare, that having cancer or any type of chronic disease would be extremely difficult. And those are some things you can control, some things that you can't. But you just try to do the best you can and get better and come back and strengthen yourself. But I think particularly where job loss is concerned, or something bad happens, there always seems to be some type of silver lining in any of our problems, or in most of our problems. And what I mean by that is that there's going to be some good. There should be some good that comes out of it. No matter how bad the situation is, there's got to be some type of good. And that's very difficult to find sometimes, especially when, when times are tough. But it is possible that there's going to be some silver lining. There's going to be good that comes out of it, but it takes time. And I'll use my own experience as an example. When I was getting some traction with my financial plan, finally, after many, many years of struggling, we finally started to make headway. Things were starting to look up. I was very specific in my goals. We're meeting them. And then what happens? My job gets eliminated. I'm like, oh crap, what the hell am I going to do? But instead of just getting down about it, I realized that as long as I kept working towards my goals and was able to meet those goals, that I was going to be happy. And it really didn't matter what I did for a living. I'd go flip burgers at McDonald's or Burger King if I had to. I'd deliver pizza. I'd do whatever I had to do in order to survive and in order to provide for my family and try to move myself forward as best as I could, no matter what life threw at me. And it's funny that when I started to realize that, and I really kind of accepted that and internalized it, life changed around. And almost immediately, I got the company that I worked with took me back. I was getting paid more, and I was officially working at home because I wanted to spend more time with my family, and I hated the commute. And I mean, all of these good things came out of that bad situation. So I guess what I'm saying is don't give up the good fight. Bad things happen. Life has a tendency to throw these twists and turns at you. That's life. You have to expect that. What matters most is what you do in response to that. Do you let it get it down and let it get you down and let it beat you and just concede and give up any of your control that you have to whatever's plaguing you? Or do you take that back and say, damn you, I'm in control here. I'm going to do whatever it is possible. I'm going to look for alternatives. I'm going to look at the opportunities, and I'm going to delete these behaviors, attitudes, and opinions that are holding me back because I'm limiting myself more than, I create my own limits.
Be like Rocky. Keep moving forward.
Adrian.
Well, John, do you have anything else to say, or should we start wrapping this up?
Yeah, I think we should wrap it up. I think I got on my soapbox and kind of just started preaching there. But it reminds me of a great joke. There was a preacher, and he's up in front of the congregation, and he says, people here in this church, we're like a baby. We need to learn how to crawl. And all the congregation says, crawl, Reverend, crawl. He says, but we're not satisfied with just crawling. We got to get up and we got to learn how to walk. And they're like, walk, Reverend, walk. And he says, but you just can't be content with just walking through life. You have to start running. And the congregation goes, run. He goes, but in order for this church to run, we need money, lots of money. And the congregation yells back, crawl, Reverend, crawl.
On that note, thanks for listening. I'm Tom Stewart. Make sure to check out swiftkickinatheass.com. There you can sign up for our free membership site, get John's simple spending plan. So if you too are $90,000 in debt or more, you might have a chance. And there's also lots of good videos and things about changing your life. John, as always, it's been a pleasure. Thanks, man. Peace.
Thank you, everyone. Keep listening. Catch you next time.